thank you to the early birds for showing up today. I had my coffee, and I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old that unfortunately did not allow me to get enough sleep. But we're going to dive right into it, and I'm going to take you through some interesting visual experiences today. The topic that I'm going to be bringing to light is the ancient astronaut theory. I've had a privilege to be on the show of Ancient Aliens for about 18 seasons, maybe some more in the future. But in that time, looking across the globe at various pieces of evidence to support the ancient astronaut theory, I'm going to share some of that with you this morning. And then at the end, if there's time, which I'm sure there will be, I'm also working on some AI that last year I had the audience be able to interact with the AI and ask some questions. My model is improved. It now works over the telephone. So a little later on, we're going to give the AI, Josh, a call. He has been trained specifically about all aspects of UAPs and the ancient astronaut theory, and we'll quiz him and maybe take a few questions from the audience. Okay, so, the theory that, when we look across the globe, especially from religious texts and that nature, there's always been these kind of parallel themes of science and religion, trying to figure out where we come from. One of the things that always caught my interest was throughout a lot of the religious artwork, there are technological details. Maybe they're slightly overlooked or they're not as prominent, but bringing those to attention and looking as to why we have these in the imagery may lead to some more questions around a broader question being answered. So you can see here that we have the depiction of Jesus on the cross. This is a fresco in a Yugoslavian church. On the two corners, you see what appear to be flying objects, some type of technological craft. There appears to be a humanoid in there manipulating levers. Another one's looking back. So it's pretty interesting that there's something happening here. Now, if you zoom in and look at this in detail, again, it feels like maybe a misrepresentation of technology. If I'm not familiar with airplanes and spaceships, maybe I've seen a shooting star or a comet or something of that nature, so I might depict things with wings, right? Or things with a trail or things with luminescence because I only understand how to give it a natural description. But to me, from a technological lens, I'm like, looks like somebody in a spaceship, some type of conveyance of a craft that's in the sky. And this is nothing new. This is where it really gets kind of interesting, is that because it's ubiquitous around the globe, we have all these cultures that went to great detail to sculpt and depict what they were experiencing and what they were seeing. I'll give you a brief description of a more current term. It's called cargo cult. So World War I, World War II, pilots, American soldiers, they fly to Africa and Australia. They land and interact with Aboriginals for the first time. They've never seen a white man. They've never seen a plane. Soldier gets out, lights up a cigarette, holds out a voice recorder and records his voice, plays it back. They think it's magic. Another thing happens is that, the soldiers set up camps somewhat in the vicinity of where these tribes are, and then we get drop shipments. Plane flies over, parachute drops supplies. Every now and then, those supplies land in the tribe and not in the soldiers' camp. And the tribe obviously, breaks it open and sees all these canned goods and weapons and supplies, and they're like, wow, what is all this stuff? So it's really interesting that eventually when the soldiers packed up and left, something happened. The Aboriginals went to great lengths scraping away what looked like runways, creating straw models out of branches and twigs and such of a prop plane, an actual sized prop plane with the propeller, the wings, the tail fin, and they would sit there for hours and just stare at the sky, hoping to entice these people back. That's cargo cult, right? They saw something, they didn't understand the technology, they did a really good job of representing it without understanding what it was. So that's exactly what we have, is throughout history, there's a lot of these depictions of flight where, man didn't understand technology, so they gave this a natural representation. And we see this symbology over and over of a winged disc, right? Like they're traveling on some type of a disc or a circle. It even looks like it has something he's gonna land. So I think all of these are really interesting symbologies to say that they were witnessing something that was happening, and they just didn't understand the technology. You can look back into religious artwork too and find these artifacts where, again, that technological layer is weaved into it. Here we have the famous St. Giovanni Madonna holding baby Jesus. I'm sorry, baby Jesus cut out of the shot, apologize. But on the bottom left corner, you see a gentleman shielding his eyes, looking up. And even the dog with him is looking up with his mouth open and panting. Right? So the artist went to great detail to call out this object in the sky. And it looks pretty much exactly like a UAP of today, right? Even if we were using our modern technology with a camera or a cell phone, you zoom in, what do you see? A blurry dot because of the energy field or luminosity coming off it, and it just looks like a glowing dot or a glowing object. 99% of the footage that we get in the public, at least. But the artist is representing something, again, that we're familiar with. He's showing a UFO, and it's got an energy field coming off of it. Pretty good detail, again, to be coming out of artwork from this type of a time frame. So I've looked across many different cultures. This one I always found extremely interesting. It's a picture of Ishtar. I wish I had a front version of her too, but she's also known as Inanna, and it was a god of the Sumerian times that liked to fly through the skies of Earth. There was actually a tale in one of the scripts by a gentleman named King Gilgamesh, and he explained how he knew of Inanna, and she was very beautiful and liked to pick on certain men and bring them to her sky abode, but they would never return. And so once he was propositioned by Inanna, and he was like, yeah, no thanks. I'm not going to come back if I go with you. So a lot of these representations, again, throughout cultures now crossing into Egypt, we see this, again, the symbology of the wings. And I think this is a representation telling us that they were witnessing beings that had the power of flight. Now, beyond just depictions of humanoid, with that power, we have, again, the technological layer. A lot of artifacts have been found in various parts. This one was found, in the tomb of a governor here in Saqqara, Egypt. I think it was it was stored in the Cairo Museum. They found it in the basement. It was basically a collection of other objects, birds and other natural symbols, but a few of these looked more intrinsic to an airplane. And they said, well, why don't you display these and put these out as something amazing? And they're like, well, it's not an airplane, it's just a bird model. But if you look at it, a lot of these things are more intrinsic to the principles of an airplane. So the 90-degree tail fin, the arc of the wings, if you were to fly this, it literally flies like an airplane. So we find a lot of these artifacts, again, across the globe that they're in a larger set and misrepresented as natural objects. These, there's a collection of grasshoppers and frogs and other natural phenomenon that we have, little golden objects, and you can very clearly tell a grasshopper from a frog, from a turtle. But these, again, even the one I'm wearing on my lapel here, these are misrepresented pieces of technology. When you look at a bird, for an example, their wings are attached up on the shoulders when they flap. All of these are either at the bottom or in the middle for a placement of the wing attachment. The tail fin is a 90-degree tail fin, which is more intrinsic to an airplane, not a bird. So a lot of these things, again, under more of a technological scrutiny, they could be airplanes. Now, I know there was an episode of Ancient Aliens where the one off to the top right, I'm so bad when I'm looking behind myself, but the one with the bulbous head there and the very large fin, they made a model of this on Ancient Aliens that was like a remote control plane. And sure enough, the thing just flew perfectly, and it was flying around. All the intrinsic properties of an airplane, it just worked. So you have to wonder, what we're seeing in a lot of these depictions. They were, again, put on display as insect models, bird models, but I think under maybe a different type of analysis, globally we can see there's lots of representations of some type of a power of flight. This one was discovered by the now infamous and deceased Zecharia Sitchin. It was in display in a museum, and it was not in display, I should say, in the museum. He found it amongst, again, these artifacts and asked the curator, like, what is this? What is this? And he was like, oh, we don't know how to classify that, so that, we don't put it on display. And Zecharia Sitchin said, well, maybe you should think about the other pieces of technology that this might connect to and showed him the evidence. And at one point, it was on a limited version of public display, kind of like a mystery artifact. But if you look at this, it clearly shows from the diagram, you can see a little bit more detail sketched out. It looks like a rocket ship, right? It has thrusters in the back. There's clearly some type of a humanoid, almost wearing like a Mayan or something type of a dress or an insignia, and it's just his knees are really bent up, and he lost his head, unfortunately. But the headless spaceship or the headless spaceman, whatever you want to call this, again, there's representation here for the power of flight. So again, when we look at that religious angle, you get this mix of information around there's something happening. They're coming down from the sky. They have the power of flight. You start to also then get certain vibes of, okay, there's rays of light, there's energy. Are they using some type of a technology to get here? I say this in a loose way because I almost would imagine sometimes if there was a biblical event of some kind, let's say in the middle of Beverly Hills over Wilshire Boulevard, a cloud forms and it starts glowing, and a man appears on it wearing robes and starts floating down, what would happen? Right? So people would freak out. Everyone would start filming it, and we wouldn't instantly. And a lot of these, again, describe this initial interaction with, again, described as gods, where the planets are described as gods battling, but perhaps there's another